This is part 6 of The Reader. The following Wednesday, Ellery turned the remaining pages of Whitejacket, feeling the lovely weight of the book in her naked lap, ultimately arriving at the end. She read, with appropriately sensitive tone, the final passages of the novel. Our Lord High Admiral will yet interpose, and although long ages elapse and leave our wrongs unredressed, yet, shipmates and worldmates, let us never forget that whoever afflict us, whatever surround, life is a voyage that's homeward bound. The end. Ellery then closed the book, running her hand thoughtfully over the gold-leaf letters adorning the spine. Her words were still resonating in the room, dissipating slowly as the two of them came back to the present, like lovers recovering from the transporting otherworldliness of making love. They each slowly breathed themselves back to the study from Melville's open oceans. The relationship between them, though most certainly steeped in sexuality, had taken on an air of absolute comfort. To Ellery, her nakedness before the man had become but a simple and now normal aspect, like that of taking a drink, or proffering a casual gesture, or uttering an oft-used phrase. It was as natural as breathing. Sitting there, the words of the novel resounding through her, she was completely unaware of her nakedness. Increasingly, the reading sessions, naked before him, without even the whisper of a touch from him, left Ellery prickly with a heightened sense of arousal. As a result, the ride home was often an agony as the town car maneuvered traffic, impeding her desire to get home and touch herself. On one occasion she had not waited, and reached her fingers down between her legs to feel the moistness of her pussy, hiding her actions from the driver with her coat folded neatly in her lap. The ensuing weeks brought continued, thrice-weekly readings at the big house on the edge of the city. When they finished savoring Whitejacket, they moved on to Joseph Conrad's The Secret Sharer, which was one of the stories in an elegant, oversized edition of A Conrad Argosy. It was yet another seafaring tale told through striking prose that had originated in a more genteel time of wordsmithing. The regular visits brought about a comfortable routine. Ellery would arrive via her carriage, climb the stairs, and enter the quiet room where the two of them could partake of the sensual secret. With each visit she tried to surprise with new variations on the black heels, and especially of what color and style of garter and stockings she would have for him. Ellery delighted in his approving murmurs of and well, signaling she had once again appeased his passion. As a result, she had become a frequent customer to an upscale lingerie store near her home. During the course of her readings, with Ellery's voice acting like a soothing metronome of eloquently measured cadence, her fantasies began more and more to introduce a taking of decisive action of a decidedly physical nature. Despite concerns that she might alarm, or worse, possibly humiliate the man, she imagined slipping down of the parlor chair and crawling naked on all floors across the floor to arrive at his feet in pleasured service to him, to push his legs apart and climb between his knees, unfasten his slacks and find his member among the folds of underwear, then take him in her mouth. She wondered, if he were impotent, she would still crave the feel of his flaccid penis in her lips. Ellery wondered if he could find pleasure in her performing fellatio on him, if in fact that were the case. If it was, she wanted to believe she could do perhaps what no other woman could do and bring him out of his dormant erectile dysfunction. How would he fuck her if he could, she wondered. Would he choose to be on top of her? Perhaps he would prefer her to stride him. Would he take her from behind? She thought, would he like to put his mouth on her? She imagined the man savoring the taste and feel of her youthful vagina the same way he so appreciated the sight of her nubile figure. Myriad thoughts of both a sensual and nasty nature filled her mind. The game now was in maintaining her reading, unfettered by the more graphic images her imagination was conjuring. She culminated her fantasies with ideas of what his climax might be like and how his semen would taste, how it would feel pooling inside her. Each Friday after the reading, he would invite her to share a brandy with him, and they would casually chit-chat in a friendly manner. Then he would hand her an envelope, which she would open in the back of the town car on the ride home, fanning through the neat stack of $100 bills. On the fourth week of their secretive liaison, as Ellery took up position before the parlor chair, which now seemed to own a permanent place in the study, and was about to start unfastening the tiny buttons that ran up the front of her blouse, he stopped her with, "No." The word caught her off guard. She raised her head to look at him. He handed her the oversized Conrad Argosy, in which Ellery had read deeply into the secret share. He then motioned for her to sit. She obeyed, settling onto the hardwood parlor chair, feeling strangely perverse being fully clothed. She wanted again the feel of the crushed velvet seat pad against her naked bottom. Unsure as to where this disruption in the order of their routine was headed, she watched the man settle back into his familiar leather reading chair and begin to unbutton his shirt. Ellery couldn't hide her surprise and watched his each and every move. He slid the shirt off and carefully draped it over the arm of the chair. He then slid his feet out of his leather shoes and methodically peeled off the black dress socks. He stood and unfastened the belt of his trousers, then unzipped the fly and let his pants fall, stepping out of them and carefully laying them across the shirt. He then removed his boxer shorts. He was now fully naked before her. His body was old but in decent shape for a man of his years. She wondered for a moment what he must have looked like when he was younger. He eased back into the leather chair, then motioned gracefully with his hand for her to begin reading. She used her fingers to trace where the bookmarker had been set, opening the book to where they had left off on the last reading. 40 minutes into her reading The Secret Share, the man interrupted her. "Excuse me," he said softly, tone begging forgiveness for the intrusion. When she lifted her gaze from the text on the page, she was surprised to see he was fully erect. His circumcised member was of a surprisingly decent size. He had very little pubic hair, due to years having slowly evicted it from his body, and it was gray. "Will you undress, please?" As if summoned by some mystical siren, Ellery set the book down and stripped before him with a little more urgency than usual. She had no idea what the next act would be. When she had completely disrobed, she stood before him, in a new pair of black stilettos, which fulfilled immaculately the definition of fuck-me pumps. "Turn around and get to your knees on the floor, and open the book on the chair." Ellery didn't hesitate, collecting up the old volume and turning around to settle on her knees against the floor, her heels pointing directly at him. She then rested her elbows on the velvet pad of the chair and opened the book before her, her ass fully on view to him. There was a delightful vulnerability of having her backside to him, where he could fully devour with his eyes the hourglass shape of her body, from the dimpled small of her back to her round ass, which led like a beacon to the exposed lusciousness of her pussy. A new sensation of arousal swept through Ellery as she began to read. She hoped she would next feel his presence close behind her, followed by the feel of his cock entering her. The visual she attached to that wish aroused her, and with a visible, glistening wetness came to the lips of her vagina. As she read aloud, Ellery became aware of an ever so slight stirring of movement disturbing the stillness of the room. It quickly became apparent he was playing with himself. The thought of him masturbating while gazing at the curves of her ass, the pointed, sharp black heels directing his gaze into the wonderful and beckoning mystery between her legs, was almost too much for her. She was desperate to turn around and suck him. Despite her mind being wild with vivid thoughts of him gushing into her mouth, onto her breast, and into her ass, Ellery remained composed enough to not act on impulse, and continued her reading, afraid if she was to suddenly abandon their agreed-upon arrangement, it might well disrupt some sacred bond of trust they held between them, and she would have ruined it all. As she read, she enjoyed the increasing tempo of his movements, understanding he was bringing himself to climax. To lure him deeper into his ecstasy, Ellery gradually spread her legs, as if she were receiving him from behind, and arched her back, the bend accentuating the curve of her ass. She was now fully exposed to him, aiding his arousal with the visual allure of her wet sex. All the while, Ellery regaled in the new knowledge that the man was in fact capable of an erection. She reveled in the notion that there was hope, if she could be certain of how to proceed, that the two of them may well find themselves in a beautiful canopied bed with satin sheets, or perhaps right here on the hardwood floor, making love with a passion so strong it would supplant the pain of the hard surface and make light of their bruises and scratches until after the wave of their orgasms had passed and they would laugh at their youthful, reckless impulsiveness. After a few minutes of this oral torture, Ellery listening to the frantic movement in the leather chair behind her as she maintained her cadence reading, the man let go with the unmistakable moan of coming. She imagined what the texture of his semen was like as it streamed down the shaft of his penis and bathed his fingers. She could almost feel the warmth of it, the consistency. In that rapidly waning moment, Ellery felt that given a little more time, she might have been able to climax without any physical stimulation whatsoever, merely the engrossing mental sensations of imagining his pleasured state. Ellie remained provocatively posed, bent against the parlor chair with legs spread, her nakedness on full display. She listened carefully, over her own heightened breathing, at his movement. When she braved to turn to look at him, she caught his backside as he exited the study, clothes bunched up in his arms. She stayed there in that position a moment longer, hoping against hope that he would return and save her from getting dressed. She wished for him to come back and gently fondle her breast, to reach his semen-soaked fingers up inside the folds of her, to use his ejaculation to lubricate her anus and accept his fingers. She wanted the wonderful contrast of gentle kisses along the nape of her neck with the animalistic pull of her hair, whipping her head back in a firm bridal hold of absolute control of her. Her body screamed for these myriad touches, but Ellery slowly came back to earth in harsh realization that their time today was over. Stiff from being on her knees against the hardwood floor, Ellery slowly rose, shaking out her sculpted legs. She closed the heavy tome of a Conrad Argosy. She then got dressed with an air of somberness, taking the opportunity to feel her wetness with her fingers. The room had lost its magical air of temperate arousal. It was now merely a well-appointed study, occupied solely by her. The room and she begged his presence. There was an added feeling of isolation between them as he held the front door for her. As Ellery descended the cement steps toward the waiting town car, she cringed at the sound of the heavy front door closing behind her, followed by the cruel sound of the deadbolt drawing across, locking him and the great house and the playful reading away from her. When she reached the car, the driver was standing attentively at the open back door, welcoming her into the plush leather confines of the Lincoln. As Ellery settled into the seat, the driver shut the door and slid behind the steering wheel. As the car pulled away, Ellery looked up at the imposing house, wondering about the man and the day that stood between their next visit. Ellery hoped she had not done anything inappropriate and that there would, in fact, be another visit. She wondered if the man thought about her and their sweetly brutal absences as the car sped her home across town. It's the end of part 6.